Log on, tune in, find out. Another good idea from Cambridge.
So, it's a great pleasure and honour to have a chance to talk to Azim Surani, who we've passed in the corridors many times without really talking. Azim, I always start by asking when and where you were born.
Yeah, I was actually born in Kenya, actually. It's a small town on Lake Victoria called Kisumu. It's actually the Obama country, which is
it?
famous,
Oh.
yes. So it's western Kenya. It's a small town where I was born in 1945.
1945.
Yes. And I was brought up there and went to school in this small town, Kisumu.
Like Obama, I read his autobiography, or one of them, and he went back over his ancestors a bit. Can you remember much about, for example, your grandparents' generation?
Yeah, so my grandparents came from India, and my paternal grandfather, he went to Madagascar. It's where my father was born. And my maternal grandfather came also from India, but he settled in what is now Tanzania, and my mother was born in Tanzania. So after my father met my mom, I think my father went to Kenya to school or something like that, and he decided that he liked Kenya better, so he, instead of going back to Madagascar, he decided to stay, and he stayed on, and then that's where he was until he died.
Which part of India? Do you know which part of India they came from?
I'm not absolutely sure. I haven't tried to trace my ancestry in that way. I think they probably came from somewhere in Gujarat. But it's one of those things that I hope I might do.
In retirement.
In retirement, yes.
Did you know any of your grandparents personally as people?
I met my paternal grandfather and grandmother, but very briefly. I remember them visiting us in Kenya, so I didn't know them very well. My maternal grandfather, I think he died when he was quite young, but I do remember my grandmother quite well. And she was, I do actually recall her.
Tell me about your parents. What were they like, and what did they do?
Yeah, so my father actually was, I think what you would now call, he's kind of worked for the colonial civil service, and I think he left school at the age of 16 or something like that. But he loved reading, so I remember him, he would read all kinds of books, and he was very interested in English literature and so on. So that's the image I have of him. So I frequently found him sitting reading, and he also liked reading history and things like that. So he was quite interested in politics and history and literature and so on.
Did he encourage you to read?
So that was, as I told you, I was brought up in this very small town, and there was actually not a great deal to do there. But one thing that was very important turned out to be very critical during my upbringing. It was the fact that there was a British Council library, and I remember my father taking me to this library and enrolling me there as a member, so I could go there and take out books and read them. So that was one thing.
That was in the small town, was it?
This was in small Kisumu. It used to be a tiny little town. I think it's grown quite a lot now, but it didn't have a lot of things when I was growing up.
It's rather strange that there would be a British library council library in such a small place, but
Yes, it is kind of strange, but I think Kisumu was one of the key towns in western Kenya. So I think that I think we had the kind of provincial commissioner and so on located in that area, and it was also important because that's where the railway which came from Mombasa went through Nairobi, and it stopped in Kisumu. And then we had this the boats which went around Lake Victoria, which was also quite important in terms of trade between various East African countries and neighbouring East African countries. So I think that was.
it was obviously an administrative centre. If your
It was
father
an
was
administrative centre.
your father was involved in that
Yeah.
colonial service.
Yes. Yeah.
And what do you remember his personality at all? I mean, I don't know whether he's still alive or whether he.
No, he died when he was quite young. He died when he was about 52 or something. So he was. I think he would have become quite a successful academic. I think he liked to read. He was much more interested in that. He was, and I think if he had had opportunities to go to a university or something like that, I think that would have been perfect for him. But I don't know what happened, but he didn't have a chance to do that. But my image of him is that that's what really excited him. That's what he spent most of his time reading. I think that was his greatest pleasure. I think, in life.
And what about your mother? What was she like, and what did she do?
So my mother actually, she looked after us basically. I mean, she didn't work.
Us is yourself and.
So I have two brothers, and I've got an older brother and a younger brother, and so she was at home, and she took care of the family. I mean, that was her job. I mean, the thing that is I remember about my mother is that my grandfather, as I mentioned, died when he was quite young, and my mother was the eldest in the family. She was the eldest daughter in the family, and when her father died, the family didn't have very much money, so I think my grandmother took up various jobs. She was doing kind of odd jobs, and it fell on my mom to look after the family. So I think that there were probably about 4 or 5 in the family. So she ended up taking up the role of her mother. So she was kind of looking after the family because they had quite hard times. They had to go through quite hard times. And, so that's.
What sort of a person was she? Were you close to her, or was she just your mother and you never thought about her at all?
I was quite close to her. I mean, she was. Again, I think she was. I would say quite preoccupied with having to take care of the family and so on. And but she was always, anxious that we were okay, and so she tried to take good care of us. But that's something that she had done for quite a long time. And Mom actually got married when she was about 17 or 18, I think 18. And my older brother was born a year later or something like that. So then she was again involved in taking care of the family. So it seems that she spent most of her life basically looking after, first of all, her brothers and sisters, and then she took care of us.
Tell me about your schools. Do you remember your first school? What was that like?
Yeah, so I belong to this community which we are the kind of followers of the Aga Khan. So we are kind of Ismaili Muslims.
Mm.
Although I'm not a practicing one anymore, but that's my other kind of.
Was this through your father or mother or that you-
Both of them.
Hmm.
Yeah. So and the Aga Khan had actually established some schools in Kenya at that time. So I started out going to the Aga Khan Primary School, which was in the small town. So it was quite a good school, and I was there until I think about the age of 8 or 9 or something like that. And then I went to what was called Kisumu Primary School, and that's where so that was a school where it was a school where mainly Asians of different Hindus and of other kind of Asians went to that school. So that's the school that I went to.
Mm.
And I was there until the age of about 13 or something like that, and then I went to what's called Kisumu High School, and I did my Cambridge O-levels certificate or whatever it was called, overseas certificate. Yeah, so I did all my schooling there.
Let's go back to at least the primary school. Were there any teachers then who, sometimes there's a person who sparks interest even at that primary school or certainly in the next school. Do you remember any teachers as being influential on you?
I don't remember anyone being particularly influential when I was at primary school, but when I went to secondary school, I do remember some of my teachers there. I think that they had quite a big part to play in what happened to me subsequently.
Well, we'll come to them. Do you remember any particular scientists? I hope that they become collectors of rare plants, or not necessarily rare ones, but some show some interest in the natural world or something which is going to anticipate their later distinguished careers. Was there any hobbies or anything you did that you think might have fed into your interest in your later work?
Well, my parents were not, there was nobody in my family or immediate family, or even the extended family who were scientists or anything of that type. I think so. There was nothing in my background which kind of led me into thinking about science. I think most of the time when people thought about having some kind of a profession, I think medicine came up, because that's what the families thought, that if you can become a lawyer or a doctor or something, that was the thing to aspire to. But to do kind of basic science was not at all in my background in any way.
Did you have any hobbies at that? Did you remember at that time? Did you
So
collect things or?
I mean, I do remember I was very interested in generally in plants and things of this type. And one thing I remember is that there was a small laboratory where I think they were doing some kind of research on malaria or something like that. And I didn't exactly know. I didn't actually go inside, but I used to go and watch them working. I mean, there was a window. I would just stand there at the window, and I would see them playing around with. And I asked somebody what they did, and they said that they were kind of investigating this mosquito larvae and trying to study how their life cycle and things like that. So there was. I think that's the thing that I remember. So I was curious about living things, basically.
You weren't particularly, or have you ever been particularly interested and competent in mathematics, or is that not important in your field?
No, mathematics was not a very strong subject. I was particularly fascinated by biological, the living things. I think those things that interested me. So I do remember sort of, one of the things I remember was when I was very little, I think about 7 or 8 or something, I would disappear and go off and go out collecting butterflies and things like that. And there was something, I found living things very attractive. I just wanted to be close to them and look at them and observe them and collect them. So that's one of the things I remember.
Well, that's the sort of clue that leads on to later things. So moving on to high school or secondary school, when did you start to specialise in some sort of subjects, or was it always a fairly open course where you could do some science and some arts and history things?
I think that the O-levels that I did was, we didn't have a choice. We did certain subjects, and what the school provided was what we. So it wasn't a very big school. I mean, there wasn't a huge range of things. So I think, for example, there were very few opportunities to, for example, learn a musical instrument or something like that, because there was nothing like that at the school. So we did kind of subjects like history, geography, and English literature, which I enjoyed very much, and sciences.
You didn't learn a musical instrument then, but has music been at all important in your life later on?
Well, I love listening to music. So it's something that I find extremely relaxing and moving and pleasurable. So I do, and I like all kinds of music.
Do you? When you say all kinds, you mean jazz and pop?
Jazz, pop, classical, opera. Yes.
You go to the King's Chapel and listen to music?
I love going to King's Chapel, yes.
And in classical music, what is your major love and taste?
Well, it's pretty widespread. I wouldn't say that I have any particular favorites. I mean, I like Schubert quite a lot, and also Mozart. But it's very varied, and on the whole, I like listening to radio rather than playing CDs or something like that. I have got a collection of CDs, but generally speaking, I like to turn on the radio and find some station and then listen to whatever is on. Because I get the kind of variety of music that is.
Does it feed? Can you see any way in which it might feed into your creative life at all? I mean, some people listen to music and feel inspired, and then it helps them to think in certain ways, or they work to music, or they just use it to relax, as you implied.
Yeah, I find music very. It does tend to inspire me. So that's one of the things why I like listening to music. Also, I find it very relaxing as well.
You don't have it on in the Gurdon Institute?
No, actually, there are some labs that have music on in the lab, but I find it very distracting. So when I'm working, I don't listen to music. I need to kind of stop working and listen to music, and then switch off the music and go back to work. So.
What about sports and games? Have you ever been interested in?
Yes, when I was at school, I used to like playing tennis and cricket. I did, and I also played a bit of hockey as well. I don't think I'm very good at sport, although I did enjoy it when I played tennis particularly. But it's not something that I have kept up.
You're wearing glasses. Are those for short-sightedness?
They're very focal.
Very focal, but you are short-sighted as well.
Yes.
So what age did you start wearing glasses?
I think I probably was about 14, 15, so it's quite a long time. Yeah.
This is, I mean, it sounds rude to us, but it's often makes sport more difficult, because often it's not
Yeah.
Clear that you're short-sighted and therefore catching cricket balls is not as easy.
Yeah, well, that might be it. Yes, I don't know.
You mentioned there were one or two teachers. Do you remember the names of any teachers who
Yes,
inspired you?
Yeah, so the teacher I remember was my biology teacher called Edwin de Mello. I think he must have been Goan origin. And I think he was a wonderful teacher, and I just enjoyed biology very much, and I found he was always asking us to go out and collect various things from ponds and things like that. And then he would spend a lot of time showing us, what we had collected, and try and describe all these wonderful things that we were observing under a microscope. And the thing that I remember is I always used to volunteer whenever he wanted some specimens from somewhere. I would go and collect them and bring them back.
So, was this a school that you mentioned the primary school was mainly for Asians, but the secondary school was for everyone in the town?
Well, when I was brought up, there was very little mixing between different racial groups. So the Asians and the Africans and the Europeans, who were mainly British, I would say, in town, there was no mixing between people of different ethnic origin. We were the whole town was very segregated.
Almost caste-like. I mean,
it was. So there was, for example, one swimming pool. There was like a club, but that was mainly owned exclusively for Europeans. We were not allowed to go in there, and that was the only place where there was a swimming pool. So as a result, I never learned to swim because although there was a big lake, the lake was full of crocodiles and people, so it wasn't a place where you would go in. Swim.
do you remember feeling it? I mean, looking back, you must feel irritated minimally about it. But do you remember at the time feeling any frustration, irritation, sadness about the segregation?
In a sense, yes. I think that I do. I think at the time when I was growing up, it did feel kind of strange that there were some areas where we weren't allowed to go, and in fact, even the residential areas were all segregated. So it was. I think it wasn't. I don't know whether it was ever written down. But it was fairly clear that there were some areas that were reserved for Europeans, and so we were not meant to go there. Although as kids we would roam around, and but it felt kind of that world was not open to us; that it was closed.
Were all the teachers at the school non-white?
Yes, they were mostly non-white. I think we had one or two teachers. I remember an English teacher who was teaching us English, Mr. Barry, who came, but they were mainly Asians.
And the students were mainly Asians too?
Yeah, I think exclusively.
Exclusively, no Africans?
No Africans, because again, the Africans were kept separated. So that, these communities existed kind of in isolation. There was very little mixing.
Interesting.
I mean, the only Africans that I came across when I was growing up were people coming and worked in our house.
You had servants?
Yeah, I think it sounds odd now, but everybody had servants. So it wasn't something that exclusive. But yeah, so it was a very strange. And yeah.
Well, to the south you had apartheid in practice, I suppose, and it was filtering up. probably you weren't involved in any. Were you involved in any other sort of activities like drama, plays, or maybe the school didn't do that?
Yeah, the school the school was very good actually, and we had various we had drama and things like that, and occasionally took part in that. We had a debating society, which I also enjoyed, took part in that. And I think the thing that actually I remember particularly is that I became a Boy Scout, joined a group of Boy Scouts, and we had great fun. We would go out camping and things like that, and it was tremendous fun. But otherwise, there were, we had to find ways to amuse ourselves. There wasn't anything around. There wasn't anything available, so we would kind of generate our own kind of excitement and adventure. And there was no television, for example.
Or probably one small cinema or something like that.
There were two small cinemas, but that was probably the limit.
Often around 16, 17, 18, certainly in English schools, children go through a kind of period when they either become quite intensely religious or lose their religion. Sometimes they're confirmed and so on. And you mentioned the Ismaili. Can you tell me more about how that might have influenced and the progress of your Aga Khan theme in your life?
I think it was. I don't think that I ever was was deeply religious or anything. I didn't have very strong feelings about religion, but I think that what it did provide was a place to meet, basically. It was because in this very small town, it was a meeting point where you met people, and so if you like, it was kind of a club that I went to, and
were there services?
There were services, yeah, at the mosque.
I mean, what
and my parents were quite keen that we go to mosque and things like that. So I did go, but I don't remember taking it very seriously, although my parents were fairly serious followers. So.
And what happened later? I mean, did it just gradually fade out, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was starting to feel that this was not for me. I couldn't kind of relate to it. It didn't make a lot of sense to me. So
even when you were there.
Yeah, I was starting to kind of drift away from it a bit, and it ceased to have any kind of real meaning for me. So, so I gradually kind of.
And now, how would you characterize your present religious?
I have no
agnostic, atheist.
Well, probably agnostic, I think.
I mean, I often ask people, particularly biologists who have encountered Richard Dawkins and so on, whether they feel there's a huge chasm between science and religion, and biologists particularly feel that Darwin and so on has replaced the need for a religion. Do you have any views on that?
Well, I think I would at this stage say that I find it very difficult to accept this concept of the abstract concept of something that is there, which is designed everything. So I find that concept rather difficult to take on board. But I should actually say that it's not something I spend a huge deal of time thinking about or It's just doesn't. It's not a subject that either way actually
You feel strongly about
feel strongly about. I mean, I listen to what people have to say, but I think it's not for me. I just say, okay, that's
Right. Well, you took sort of whatever it was, O-level equivalents, Cambridge O-level equivalents. Did you go on and do sort of A-level equivalents, or?
yes. So this kind of coincided, you know, when I finished school. I was doing pretty well at school, at my high school, and then there was quite a big change. The country was going through a big change because we were approaching independence.
This was about 1962.
Early 60s, yeah. So things were changing, and we could feel that things were changing. And one of the consequences of this was that the standards started to deteriorate because a lot of people started to leave, and it's kind of destabilized the existing kind of structures and so on. So I went to school in Nairobi at the Kenya Polytechnic to do my A-levels, but it was clear that at the time that the standard of teaching was very poor. I mean, I didn't know it at the time, but it soon became clear to me that you know, we were not really getting the kind of training that would allow us to make progress and get good A-levels. So I did actually spend a couple of years there, but I didn't get very good A-levels as a result. So that's where I did my A-levels, and then I left.
You were boarding, were you in Nairobi?
I actually
Staying with relatives, or?
I was staying with relatives. I had an uncle in Nairobi.
What subjects did you do at A-level?
I did biology, chemistry, and physics.
But you didn't do particularly well.
I didn't do very well actually, or maybe I was a late developer or something. But I was not very good. It was pretty hopeless.
Were you happy or unhappy as well as not doing very well?
I was pretty unhappy because throughout my primary school and my high school, I was doing pretty well. I mean, I did extremely well. And I think I was particularly disappointed because I think my parents were very upset that suddenly that and my parents were particularly concerned about all of us, because I remember my father saying that we were entering very uncertain times, and that what was going to be very important for us and for our future was that we acquired good education, because that was the only way that was the way we could survive. So my father was particularly keen that we do as well as we possibly can, because that was important for our future. And I was also I should also say that the family went through pretty dramatic times just when I was at high school, because my father decided that he left his job, which was quite a good job and quite secure and so on. And he decided that he wanted to start a business or something like that. But I don't think that he was really cut out to be a businessman. I think he was not ruthless enough to do that, and that failed very badly. So things were pretty bad. I mean, financially pretty bad, and so I was very disappointed that my parents had to work very hard to kind of see me through school and so on. And I was so anxious not to disappoint them, so I found that personally very hard that I hadn't been able to
You passed your A levels, but that's a low grade.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it wasn't.
Low grades. And so, what was open to you? What did you do then?
Well, this was then, you know, because we were approaching independence. You know, my parents were wondering what to do, and my brother actually had been to UK, and he did a degree in civil engineering in London. And my parents were undecided whether we would stay in Kenya or leave, or although they at the time they decided that they would stay in Kenya, but they wanted me to go because there were no real opportunities for me to go to university in Kenya. There was a University of Nairobi there, but it was quite new and it wasn't particularly good. So they wanted me to come to UK. So that's what I did.
So you came to the UK. Where did you come and to do
So
what?
I came to UK and I didn't have. Excuse me.
Must have been about 1963.
I think it was around 1963.
Hmm.
So I did not have any funding from anywhere when I arrived, and I spent the first year in London actually just doing some casual jobs and things, and basically trying to survive, and trying to think what I was going to do next. And so there were two options. One was to try and do my A-levels again so I can get better grades and try and get entrance to the university, or to try and go somewhere and do a degree of some kind. And I kind of discussed this with my father, and he thought that it was probably not worthwhile trying to do A-levels again, but I might as well make some progress and go somewhere where I can do a degree. At least I was then moving forward.
So what did you do?
So I went to what's now Plymouth University. They had London external degrees. So I joined there and did a degree in I don't know what you'd call it, natural sciences or something like that, biology or something. So I did. It was a degree in biology, chemistry, and zoology, I think, as an external London degree. But so that's what I had at the end of 3 years. Again, not sufficient to take me forward, as it were.
Well, tell me about coming to England from Africa. Was it a big shock, or just?
Yeah, that was very interesting because you know, as I told you, I was brought up in this small town, and you know, we were all kind of segregated, and then suddenly arriving in London and then finding myself in the middle of England was as you can imagine, quite a shock, quite an experience.
Did you find any segregation when you got here?
I don't think I did experience minor kind of incidents, I think, but nothing major. In fact, I met some very, very nice people when I came and made some good friends, and I was quite amazed that, you know, to make some really good friends.
Were they Asian or British or?
Well, they were mixed. I met some people of all different types, and that was quite a revelation at that point.
Much less segregation than you experienced.
Yes, there was. I mean, there were undercurrents at that point. Not as bad as it subsequently. 2 or 3 years later, I think there was when a lot of Asians started to come from East Africa. Then I think that there was much stronger racism and stronger feeling against immigrants and so on. I think when I arrived, I didn't detect that.
What was the Plymouth that you mentioned? That wasn't enormously exciting, but was the teaching sort of all right? But
pretty bad. I would say. It was. No, it wasn't a great experience, I would say.
So life gets worse.
But the problem was that again, I didn't have a lot of money. So money was very short. My parents were trying to support me, and I was working whenever I could get free time. I would work and try to get some money. And I remember I used to go and work at a bakery doing a 12-hour shift or something, which was very well paid. But so it was important. Survival was also important, so I didn't have a lot of spare time or spare cash. But I think there was this. I think survival was the name of the game at that point, and trying to see if I could somehow make progress. But again, I think in the quality of the teaching and so on was not particularly good, and I don't think I actually enjoyed it very much.
So when are things going to get more cheerful?
Sorry.
Okay. I'm waiting for the rocket to start taking off. But tell me what happened next. I mean, after you.
Okay, so that was. So then I thought that I had to move on, because remaining static was not an option, and I still had. I think I had this ambition that I would like to get into getting some kind of career in science, which is something that really interested me, and I guess that was the kind of thing that drove me on. I just thought I just have to keep at it, and somehow I will make it. There was some inner belief that I was capable of doing it. I just needed to get a good break, and then I would be fine. So I think at this point I decided that I needed to, because my first degree was not very good, so I had to do something else. I had to get another qualification to really make it possible for me to move to the next phase. So at this point I decided to go and do an MSc in biochemistry. So I went to University of Strathclyde and met some very wonderful people there. And the science I started to do, this was mainly doing MSc by research rather than by coursework. And then I started to enjoy this, because then I was doing things with my hands, and I thought, this was something exciting. And so I finally started to sense that now I was really getting into it, and this was something that I would really like to do. So I stayed there for a couple of years, and I'm sorry, there is another unfortunate incident here, which
we go down before we go up. Okay.
So this is the final going down, if you like. So I was at this university in the Department of Biochemistry, and the lecturers there were very good, and we got to know some of them quite well. And they kept saying to me that, you're doing really quite well. So, why don't you stay one extra year? If you do that, you'll get a PhD rather than finishing off with an MSc. So I thought, well, that's quite a nice idea. So I went to see the head of the department, Professor Field.
Professor?
Field.
Field.
I think he's no longer with us. So I went to see him, and I asked him, I sort of told him that I talked to various lecturers in the department, and they were kind of encouraging me to stay on extra year and get a PhD. And he absolutely refused. And he said, as far as he was concerned, all the people who came from the Commonwealth should really go back. So he was not very encouraging.
It was on those grounds rather than your ability, you think?
That's what he told me. And I came out of this completely devastated. And I went and talked to one or two lecturers, and he was not a very nice man, actually. So I think that they were not surprised. It came as a big shock to me. And at this point, I was pretty fed up. So I just wanted to get out, basically. So I wrote to somebody. I had, doing my research, I had actually got to know some, I hadn't met him, but I got to know of somebody in Paris, a guy called Sequoias, who had just come back from the States and just set up his unit in Paris. I wrote to him. In fact, the day when I came out of this meeting with my professor, when I wrote to him, that evening I wrote to him, and I said, do you have anything? I'd really like to come to Paris and work there. And he sent me, in those days, I think he flew from somewhere, from London to Paris or something. He sent me an open ticket to Paris.
Fantastic.
So I just thought, this was amazing. So I left and I went off to Paris.
You must have written in this letter, I am so-and-so, and that I know something about so. You must have written.
It was, so I told him, I knew about what he was working on.
Yeah.
And I told him what I had done, and I kind of said to him that I think, I would like to come and work in your lab, and this is what I've done, and I think I would find it very exciting if I could come and work with you. So I went to Paris, and he offered me this job in his lab. So I ended up in Paris. That was in 1970.
1970, just after the
After
Montemore.
So it was quite an interesting period, politically and so on in Paris. So that was quite exciting.
You enjoyed your time in Paris?
That was lovely, yeah, that was wonderful. And it was wonderful in some ways and not so good in other ways. And it was wonderful in that, again, I met a lot of people, and most of the people I met were not scientists. They were doing French literature or philosophy or something like that. The bad thing was that Sequoias had just come back from the States, so his lab was not in a very good state actually for doing research. But he was very kind and somehow inspiring, and also very encouraging. He was always, it was nice to chat to him. Basically, he was very excited about his work, and so I spent a lot of time chatting to him about various ideas and experiments. Although at the end of it, I don't think I did very much work, because because I was enjoying Paris too much. I spent most of my time not going to the lab. But I think I have very good memories of being there, and I think I learned quite a lot about lots of different things. So it was educational in that sense. But 2 years I was there, and then this was not something. This was not taking me anywhere, because I kind of realized that my ambition was still to get into some kind of scientific profession and get into doing some serious research. So that was still at the back of my mind. The French system, I don't know whether it still exists, but it was kind of a very strange system that you could be given tenure while you were doing your equivalent of PhD. And Sequoias actually told me that I could join the French system, which would give me tenure, and I could work there. So I was actually preparing some documents towards this application, but somehow I was not convinced that this was the place for me. Didn't have the right atmosphere, or I didn't think that I would be able to somehow do very good.
When you say it didn't have the right atmosphere, and we're interested in creativity, what was wrong about the atmosphere, or was it just that there were too many other attractions in Paris?
Well, there were too many other attractions, but I think that maybe the people who were around me in the lab and so on were not, somehow didn't it didn't feel that there was the right atmosphere to I don't know, I can't
Put your finger.
put my finger on it, but I think it didn't seem like I would, in the end, I mean, although being in Paris was very exciting, the lab in the end I found was lacking somehow. So.
Well, interviewing other scientists who've been to Paris, they've had similar criticisms of lack of work ethic or something, and excitement about their experience there. So, I mean, Paris has had great periods and other periods less so.
So I think it was there was something about it which didn't feel right, and maybe it was. Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't. I couldn't see myself establishing a career in scientific research in that setup. So I had to.
Where was the lab? Was it in the CNRS or?
It was an INSEM institute. It was it was based at a hospital in the outskirts. Well, it was southern part of Paris, near Kremlin-Bicêtre. And it was kind of like a medical school. I used to see a lot of students who were doing their clinical work. And there were other labs, some of the labs as well there. But, it was somehow didn't feel right.
So what did you do instead?
Well, this is where, I had a very, very lucky break, because it was a complete, pure accident. And I think I'd come to a meeting, I think it was in Nottingham, and because I didn't know, I just come to UK, and I just thought I'd come to this meeting. I didn't have any particular plan in my head. I just thought, well, it might be good to just go and see what's going on. And at this meeting, I think it was, I'd gone to the bar before supper, and I was just sitting there, and there was nobody else there. And this guy walked in, and it turned out to be Bob Edwards.
Ah.
And
You better tell people who Bob Edwards was.
So Bob Edwards is the pioneer of test tube babies. He was the one who, with
Steptoe.
Patrick Steptoe, produced the first test tube baby called Louise Brown.
Hmm.
So this was in 1972, and I walked in, and so Bob walked in, and I don't know if you
Yes,
met
I know.
Bob.
I have. Yes.
Bob is wonderful.
I've tried to interview him, but he's
Yeah.
resolutely refused to answer my emails.
Yes. He's sadly not very well now.
No.
But, anyway, so that was Bob, and I'd never met him before. He didn't know who I was, and we started chatting because there was nobody else there. And so he said to me that, so what do you do? And I don't know, I kind of flippantly said, well, not at all, not a lot, or something like that. So we started chatting, and he asked me what I was interested in and what I'd done, what I was doing. And for some reason, I just turned around after we chatted for about half an hour or so, and he said, maybe you should come to Cambridge and do a PhD. He said, that's what you should do. He said, no. I thought, well, that sounds like a very good idea, but I said, I don't have any money. He said, oh, I'll get you an MRC studentship. I said, no, don't worry about that. So I was kind of a bit surprised, and anyway, I went back to Paris, and I didn't think anything about this, because I thought, well, people say these things. We were sitting in a bar, right? So I just went back, and 3 weeks later, I got this letter from Bob saying he'd talked to the prof, and that he had got me a studentship to come to Cambridge. So I was quite amazed. I couldn't believe it. So I came to Cambridge in October '72 as an MRC PhD student. That was the luckiest break, because it just happened completely by chance. So there was no previous connection with Bob or anything. Just somehow, based on this brief conversation, he was convinced that I would be a good student or something. I don't know.
So this is the Department of Physiology, isn't
This
it?
is the Department of Physiology, yeah.
Which was in the dining site.
Yeah.
Yes, I met him about 2 years after that. But was it exciting coming to Cambridge?
Oh, it was enormously exciting. I just, that as soon as I walked in, just the environment and the atmosphere of the labs, and I just thought this is fantastic.
How was it different from your?
Well, I don't know. I think that the kind of, even the casual conversation that I was starting to have with people around was much more interesting. The questions they were asking were much more exciting, and you could start to kind of sense that it was possible to do things. You could ask questions and find ways of answering. Somehow there were colleagues around, and there were facilities and everything. So everything was possible. Anything you wanted to do was possible.
What was your PhD on?
So when I came, so this is kind of interesting, because when I arrived, I had a few discussions with Bob, and so the impression I had was that Bob was really pretty happy with whatever I wanted to do. He wasn't, so I think he wanted me to, because this was the time when he was trying to develop this IDF, and he was very involved in working with Patrick Steptoe, so he was frequently going away to Oldham to work with Patrick, and so he was kind of in and out. He wasn't there a lot of the times. But he was very inspiring. I mean, he was incredibly inspiring and wonderful to talk to. Even a short conversation with him was very uplifting, and he wanted to kind of go and do things. So when I came, he thought maybe I should work on early embryos, and he would particularly wanted me to work on events which lead up to implantation of the embryo, because this was something that he was very interested in, because they were trying to develop these embryos in vitro, and they wanted to put them back. And one of the problems I think they were having was implantation, because they were trying to synchronize the embryo and the uterine sensitivity and things of this type. So that was something that he thought would be a good topic for me. So I did work on this area of implantation, but increasingly I think my interest really was very strongly in early development of the embryo. That was the thing that really excited me. I just was fascinated by early embryonic development, particularly mammalian embryos, because there was very little known about it at the time when I started.
Your thesis actually went in a direction which Bob hadn't particularly anticipated. Is that right?
Well, the interesting thing was that I mentioned Bob was away quite a lot, so as a result I had quite a lot of freedom to kind of do things that I wanted to do, or things that excited me. I mean, as I mentioned, the lab was a lot of very interesting people around, so it was a very rich environment.
Were there any others who particularly you
Well,
worked with?
Richard Gardner was one of the people there, and he was just developing these micro techniques for looking at early mouse lineages and so on, which became very important subsequently towards understanding of mammalian development. And the particular contact I had was with Matt Kaufman. So Matt was working on parthenogenesis, parthenogenetic development in mice, and so this actually was the area that really started to excite me a lot. And I did some work together with Matt on trying to actually figure out why these parthenogenetic embryos were...
Explain parthenogenesis.
Okay, so parthenogenesis, I think in plain English, is virgin birth. Basically, what you can do is you can take mouse oocytes and you can put them in culture without fertilization, but you can trigger the onset of early development. And one of the things that triggers them to initiate development is simply by ducking them in alcohol, 7% alcohol for 7 minutes, switches them on, and they start developing as if they were fertilized, just like fertilized eggs. And this was fascinating because some of these embryos, if you transfer them back into foster mothers, would develop up to nearly mid-gestation, and then they would die. So there was this very advanced development. And the question that became intriguing, interesting, was why did they stop at this particular point, and why couldn't they go on further? Because there are various creatures, a lot of other vertebrates like fish and frogs had been shown to be capable of development right through to term. And it was intriguing why mammalian mouse embryos couldn't do that. So this actually,
Is the dividing line between mammalian and sort of amphibian fish forms, is that where it splits?
well, the main difference is that mammalian embryos grow in utero, so they have to have the placenta to support their nutrition and development, subsequent development, whereas the other vertebrates, their embryos develop outside, and they don't. All of the nutrients they need for development is all packaged into the egg, and then they are free to go. So the what you call viviparity or development of the placenta is the main difference.
So birds would be the same, because they lay eggs.
Birds would be the same, yes, and the egg-laying mammals, the monotremes, echidnas, and so on. They are also egg-laying. So this was. This somehow really fascinated me. I really wanted to know why they were not able to go on developing to term. And that's really kind of became my main passion. I just wanted to know why they stopped. There were many theories at the time, people working on early mammalian development, and so one of the ideas that was around was that somehow the sperm not only contributed genetic material but also contributed non-genetic material to the egg, and somehow this was important for development. So it was the non-genetic component coming from sperm which was important for their subsequent development. But we did some experiments and which disproved this, which was the main hypothesis. And so there were some other experiments that were also taking place at this time, and I won't sort of go into it because it's kind of slightly involved story, but there were some papers that were published around 1977, 79, which basically made the claim that parthenogenetic embryos could develop to term by doing some other different kinds of experiments. But this was still a big puzzle. Anyway, so so at this point, which was around 1979, I'd finished my PhD, and I was still in the Department of Physiology. I had a grant from the MRC to continue, but that came to an end. So at this point, I was thinking of going off to work in the States or in Canada, because my family by then had moved to Canada, and so I thought I would also join them there. So, but in the meantime, just as I was about to set off to go for interviews, there was a job advertised at the Bagram Institute, or more strictly at an institute on Huntingdon Road. Thaddeus Mann was the head of that. It was part of the university as a research unit of agricultural research grant. So I applied for that job, and telling them that I was about to go for interviews, so they in the States, and so they called me for an interview, and they offered me the job immediately. So before I'd gone out for interviews, so I thought I would stay on in Cambridge and carry on with my research.
Was this a research job?
This is a research job, yeah. So this was again turned out to be important, because at this point there were these conflicting papers, some suggesting that you might get parthenogenetic development to occur, and I wasn't sure whether I wanted to pursue this or not. But anyway, I got this job, and when I got this job, I decided that I would pursue this further, because I was not quite satisfied that the story had been, that we really understood what was going on. So anyway, I started doing further work, and I think I started to get some indications around 80 to 83 that there was something very unusual and probably something very interesting going on. And basically the experiment that we did was using micromanipulation. We were able to create eggs which were either had two maternal genomes or two paternal genomes, or control with one maternal, one paternal. And we started to compare their development and asking questions about what happens when we do this. And what we found was that you did actually require a maternal and a paternal genome for normal development to occur through to term. That if you made embryos with two female genomes or two male genomes, they died sometime after implantation. Now, what was really important about these experiments we were doing was that genetically we could create these embryos. Let's say an embryo which had two maternal genomes, but these two maternal genomes came from two completely different eggs. So genetically they were as diverse as making an embryo with one male and one female genome. So genetically they were identical, but they were different in terms of the parental origin of the genome that was going in. And doing kind of experiments of this type, we realized that there were these kind of functional differences between the two parental genomes. And putting all the data together, what we found was that the maternal genome seemed to be much more important for the development of the embryo, whereas the paternal genome seemed more important for the development of the placenta. So there were these kind of functional differences, and this was quite amazing, because it was not something that people were aware of, that that the parental origin of the genome made a difference to the development. So we call this phenomenon imprinting, because what it seemed to suggest is that the parental genomes carried some kind of an imprint of their parental origin, and that this somehow provided the information that made them functionally distinct from each other. So it wasn't the difference wasn't a genetic one, but it was epigenetic. It was something that was which was not in the DNA sequence, but something else. So this was the start of this understanding of what this additional layer was, which was necessary for proper development to take place. I remember actually, I think it was around 83 or something, when I think the people around Cambridge were starting to hear about these strange experiments that were ongoing somewhere in Cambridge, and I was invited to go and give a seminar in the Department of Genetics to talk about this stuff, and I could see they were very skeptical. I think that they thought it was all kind of phenomenology or something, and it wasn't very interesting, and it was kind of And so I think that some of the people were kind of dismissed it as maybe there was some mistake, or wasn't very important. But I was convinced, I didn't know what the mechanism was, but I was convinced that the observations were correct. So that's what I told them. So that kind of laid the foundation.
Did you, I mean, we were talking earlier for the film about risk. I mean, did you feel with this mild skepticism, put it at least, did you feel you were taking a risk in pursuing this, or did it just feel that you had to do it and there was no real risk?
I think it was a risk. Yeah, I was aware that this was very risky because it couldn't complete dead end, and that it wasn't particularly interesting, and there might be some trivial explanation for it, and it wasn't that important anyway. And I think I was aware of the risk because I think what I did was I was doing some other projects on the side, so that these were kind of more bread and butter things that I thought was important just to keep things moving along while I was trying to do some really high risk things. But you see, I think that when I was doing my PhD, I was given a lot of freedom. So I was allowed to kind of think and do things that I wanted to do. That's what Bob gave me the opportunity to do. So I had come through this kind of experience that it was fine to ask questions if they interested you, and not sort of say, this is too high risk, I'm going to do it. But somehow I felt that this was very important, and particularly when I got this job, I thought I could now take a risk. I sort of purposely decided that I was going to pursue this because it was exciting. I thought that there was somehow there was something important and mysterious about this, and I needed to know what it was.
But you said that nowadays young people starting in science are less able to take risks or less encouraged to do so. Is that so?
I think it is so, because I think now, the students. See, when I did my PhD, I was not required to write first year report, second year report, or anything like that. I went in the first day, had this chat with my supervisor, and then I was more or less free until I finished came back 3 years later with my thesis. And I had this complete freedom to do whatever I wanted. Nowadays, I think the students are over-supervised. They have to produce first year report and so on. So they're constantly kind of worrying about have they got enough results to go in their first year report, and I think they're being over-assessed. And then there is this phenomenon of getting publications, and they have to be in high impact journals and things like that. This was not the case when I was doing my PhD. I think we just went on and did the experiments, and then when we had enough results, we published it. And we didn't worry about where it was published. There was less emphasis on how many papers you published, and whether they were in high impact journals or not.
You mentioned that you had nearly went to Canada and possibly to America. I mean, there must have been other times when you attempted to go to well-funded labs in the States or elsewhere, have been encouraged to do.
Yes, I have off and on been offered various jobs in various places, but I don't know. I've always felt that Cambridge is a very special environment, and it's quite unique, and somehow I've really felt at home here. And I think the environment is very important. It's difficult to define what it is, but I think it's just.
That's what I was going to try and get you to do. I mean, you had to try and lay that out a little more. I mean, is it the collegiate system? Is it the beautiful town? Is it the fine facilities? Is it the good beer and pubs? Or what is the special environment?
Well, it's certainly a very beautiful place, which helps. I think there's a lot of history, so you have the sense that you are somewhere very special. I think that it's a small town with a very high density of scientists, and the thing that often happens is that you could be walking around and you bump into people, and I think there's sort of having very casual conversations with people about some ideas, and which you may not kind of think about is very important. I think that are very influential and can have a big impact on the way you think about things and so on. These are kind of things you can't really quantify and somehow very important. I don't think that the facilities now, if they ever were, in terms of the resources and the facilities, I think probably there are many labs in the States with, huge resources and better facilities and so on. That might in a sense be an advantage, curiously, because we have limited resources, we have to do much more kind of lateral thinking. I talk to my colleagues in the States about this, and what they say, their style of working is different because they have a lot of resources and money that what they tend to do is they cover a large area of the field they're interested in and they make the kind of assessment of what is important retrospectively once they've got all the results in. We can't do that here. We don't have that kind of money or manpower, so we have to think very hard first what we want to do and then pick carefully the areas that we're going to pursue. So it's a different way of working. I think it's the style that I prefer myself.
Does it also have the implication, A, that you have to do much more of your work yourself because you don't have lots of research assistants and students, and B, that you are encouraged to do much more, as it were, physically with your own hands and so on, because you can't just buy lots of equipment and get it sorted out in that way?
Well, I wish I could say yes to that. I mean, I sadly don't do experiments now myself because the nature of biological research has changed quite dramatically. The tools have got much more sophisticated. We have molecular biology now and biochemistry, and as well as classical embryology and genetic approaches that are all kind of come into this. So it's much more of a group exercise. I think you need, if you're head of a lab, you very often you kind of have to get a team of people with different expertise and so on, and work as a group to solve.
Which is what you are.
This is what I am doing.
So
now.
you're becoming an administrator.
I would say, again, sadly, that is the case, because the other thing that has happened is that the administrative load has increased because there are so many regulations now, home office regulations to do with animals and health and safety regulations and so on. It's just plus the fact that I have to report on all my students, which Bob never had to do on my behalf. I don't think he wrote a single report when I was a student. Now I have to write reports and read these reports. They write every year, so that's it takes up quite a lot of time.
How many students do you normally
I tend
have?
to have about 5 or 6 students.
These are PhD students?
PhD students, yeah.
Do you do other kinds of teaching? I mean, do you do
I do, yeah.
lecturing?
Lecturing. Yeah.
Do you enjoy that?
Yes, I think I always grumble when the time comes when I have to prepare lectures, but I've always found the experience very enjoyable. Once I've got going, then the students. I now only teach final year students. I don't do earlier years, so I've found the students extremely bright and very interesting to teach because they come up with some interesting questions.
You do sort of supervisions, do you, with them or not?
Yeah, they come to me for the
One-to-one.
people who are teach. Yeah, they will come and
Mm.
ask for supervision. So I do that. Yeah, on one-to-one basis. Yeah.
How many hours of that do you?
It's not a lot. I mean, I do about 10 lectures a year, so my teaching load is not very heavy.
10 lectures and a few hours of supervision.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I'm finding increasingly is that I mean, my students will contact me by email, so there's quite a lot of informal exchange that occurs. You know, they will write to me and ask very specific questions about some aspect that they are not clear about. So they won't come necessarily. I mean, they do, but on top of that, they will often just write an email and ask me about something.
You're a fellow of King's.
Yeah.
When did you become a fellow?
I became a fellow in 1994.
1994.
Yeah.
And have you found that enriching or useful or helpful?
It's been extremely enriching and very enjoyable experience. I'm slightly sad that I haven't spent as much time, actively at King's as I would have liked, because for two reasons. One is that my research takes up quite a lot of time, and I usually like to be very close to the lab, visit something that I think is important, and I like to be around. So I like to leave my door open so my students and postdocs can come and talk to me at any time. So it's completely open, and so that's something that does take a lot of time, and I'm in my lab for many hours each day. So that's the thing. I travel quite a bit because I go to quite a lot of meetings, one type or another, scientific or committees or things like that. And I have also been involved since 2000. I was quite heavily involved in this trying to get the Stem Cell Institute established in Cambridge, which took quite a bit of time. So,
has that been successful?
So that's been now set up, so that's all finished now, and so that's up and running. And I'm on the advisory board, but it's now there are people in charge of that and running it, so I don't have to do a lot on that.
In your travels, do you mainly go westwards to America, or have you made travels to either Africa, India, China, Japan?
Yes, so a lot of the meetings are in the States, but I do go to Japan quite frequently. I've been to India and also Singapore is another place that I go to.
Is China beginning to be active?
China is beginning to beginning to emerge as a big player. I think it's still, again, they have a lot of resources, but I think they're still at a stage where they have to sort of figure out what to do with that. I think so they haven't quite found their direction yet. They have certainly got the resources, but I think they have to figure out how to use those resources.
And do you ever go back to Africa?
I have not been to Africa since 73 when my father died. I think it's
So you're
something
not
that
doing an Obama.
Sorry?
You haven't done an Obama ring.
I haven't done an Obama, no. It's something I would love to do. I think I would. I think I'd like to go back. I have mixed feelings about it. I mean, because I think it's probably changed. It's certainly changed a lot, and I have very happy memories of growing up. So I don't know whether I should. But I think I might. If I don't go to Kenya, I might go some other part of that.
Edge your way there. Tell me a little bit. Well, one other question, a personal one was: are you married? And
Yes, I'm married. Yeah.
you have a family? Or?
Yeah, I have two daughters. They are teenagers, 17 and 14. So, yeah.
And is your wife an academic or?
My wife actually trained as a speech therapist, and she worked for many years with children who within the NHS, working with children who have various problems with language, acquiring language, or have some kind of problem of that type. And then when we had children, she decided that she wanted to stop working for a while, and then she decided she didn't want to work with children anymore.
Had enough of her own. Yeah. Well, I just got one more sort of general question, which is about your current work and about the implications of that work into the future. Can you tell me something about?
Yeah, so I think that this work we did, which it actually happens to be the 25th anniversary of the paper that we published in Nature in 1984 on imprinting. I think that has become much more important than even I had thought. And the reason is as follows, that there is now a whole field of epigenetics which has grown up, not necessarily from the work we did, but I think that phenomenon is quite central to this idea of research on epigenetics. And the reason is that we now know, the human genome has been sequenced and many other genomes have been sequenced. So we know what the genetic code looks like. We know the DNA sequence. But it's important to figure out how this genetic code is then translated into various cells and tissues, because although each cell contains the same genetic material, the cells themselves are very different. And so this is where the research on epigenetics is extremely important, because this area of research is to do with understanding how different genes are selected for expression and repression to create this diversity of cell types. So this is one of the major areas of research, and it also has implications for stem cell research, because again, if you're starting with a stem cell, like an embryonic stem cell, it's just the potential to give rise to all the different cell types. We really have to know how these cell fate decisions are made. And part of that understanding of cell fate decision lies in the understanding at the epigenetic level, how the cell deals with selecting the right set of genes to be turned on and off. So it's become quite important. It is also the area where which can inform us about how, when you have a terminally differentiated cell, what are the mechanisms which you can use experimentally to take it back to its origin, to make it more like an embryonic cell, so that this kind of reprogramming. So these mechanisms that are operating in cells, which especially in early stages, where the decisions are being made in response to signals, and then that come from outside, and then converted into this epigenetic information is something that I think is quite central to many areas of research now. There is also increasing awareness that some of the things that go wrong, for example, when some cells become cancerous, also could be examined from the perspective of the epigenetic mechanisms that have gone wrong. Instead of these cells behaving normally and doing the normal things, they've got locked in a particular state, so they just continuously keep proliferating rather than stopping and then differentiating. They just keep proliferating. So I think that this may also have some value in trying to design various therapeutic agents to combat diseases. And there are a large number of pharmaceutical companies, for example, who are exploring epigenetic mechanisms to understand what these key enzymes are that are involved in this kind of modifications, and trying to find agents that can stop these enzymes from working or malfunctioning.
Are you involved with any of these? I mean, nowadays many scientists, particularly in Cambridge, are on the edge of biotechnology firms
Yes.
and so on. Are you involved in any of those?
Well, as I mentioned to you earlier, I'm funded by the Wellcome Trust, and about 8 years ago, there were some people from the Wellcome Trust came to see me, and they thought that some of the work that I was doing was important and could be useful in the context of some kind of translational research. So, and through their encouragement, we set up a spin-out company. It's called Cell-Centric. So this is a university spin-out company, and what we're doing with this is that so the lab now is really involved in really trying to understand detailed mechanisms that are involved in epigenetics, and trying to find the key molecules and genes. And so the understanding we get from this basic research is then used by the company to see if some of these genes might also feature particularly in cancers. And the idea is that once we identify these genes, then we could maybe look for therapeutic agents that can interfere with their activity and so on. So I'm kind of through that. I'm involved in.
Does it? I mean, to someone whose research is of no value to anybody like myself, you seem to be likely to pose ethical and other kinds of borderline problems, being within a university research setting, but also potentially discovering things which might be extremely valuable financially. Does it give you sleepless nights, or are the protocols worked out so well now?
I think that there are two ways of looking at it. I mean, the work that we do, if it is interesting, we will publish it anyway. So it will come into public domain, and so it is free for anybody to exploit it if they want to. I think I was reluctant to get into any kind of commercial things myself for quite a long time, but think it is quite important, and I certainly now think that it is very important that if making any basic discoveries, if they are exploitable, particularly in terms of trying to deal with very nasty diseases, then I think it's not a bad thing. The company actually, it is a university spin-out company, so I don't actually own it. I have shares in it, but it is at an arm's length, and I don't have day-to-day dealings with it. I'm not a director of the company, and I sit on the board as an observer, and I don't try to influence what they do, and they don't try to influence what I do. So I think we kind of coexist happily. And as far as the intellectual property is concerned, there are very clear university rules. So all the intellectual property is owned by the university, and that is then, through a pipeline agreement, can go to South-Centric, and if they don't want it, then it's offered to anybody else who wants it. But as I say, we would, if the company didn't exist, we would still publish the work. So the information would come out into the public domain. And I think one of the criticisms that was the Wellcome Trust particularly used to get was that they were funding all of this basic research, and spending millions of pounds on basic research, and so what was UK getting out of it? Was there any benefit to the people here? And the Wellcome Trust responded by sort of going around to the people they fund, particularly the people they've been funding over a long period of time. Sort of discussing with them and asking whether there was anything that was worthwhile, and encouraging them to see if there was possibility of setting up a spin-out company.
I've got two, I keep having more thoughts, two last questions. One is, you mentioned the exciting people you can possibly meet in the street. If you were on a desert island and you had to choose 2 or 3 of your Cambridge scientific colleagues, who would you take with you?
What a difficult question.
Not necessarily for their character, but I've interviewed people like Sidney Brenner and Aaron Krug and Martin Rees and so on, and been amazingly impressed by their abilities. But have there been any giants you've met in Cambridge?
Well, Sidney Brenner is certainly comes to mind. He's hugely inspiring and has such an original.
Many people have said he's the cleverest man in Cambridge.
He's amazing. He's extremely inspiring. Very interesting. On a good day.
Even Sydney would say that too.
Yeah.
So he would be one. What about Aaron or your head of institute, John Gurdon? Or
yes, John Gurdon. I also, when I was working at Babram, I had interactions with Aaron Krug and also with Cesar Milstein. And Cesar, I remember, had very, very interesting discussions with him. Although our fields were not, were kind of diverse, but I found him extremely interesting guy to chat to. There are so many. That's
Anne McLaren.
Anne McLaren is another one, because Anne was a very close colleague. When she retired, she came to Cambridge, and her lab was next door to mine, and she came to all our group meetings, and we used to have really good discussions. Again, it was. I think it's. The interesting thing is that I mean, leaving aside bit names, I think what is very interesting is bumping into people, postdocs and so on, and people who are starting up their new groups or something like that. And you find, they can have some very interesting ways of looking at it. So I don't think it's necessarily the well-known people, but people at all levels, including students. I mean, some of my students have been very inspiring and come up with some amazing observations and reflections on things. So I think it is all levels. So it's a whole thing which I think is very special.
And if you were giving them, this is the last question, if you were giving a young student, say, just starting on the postgraduate level of their life, some advice to help them to become scientists, what would you tell them?
I think the key thing they really have to sort out in their heads is, what is the question that excites them? What is it that they find interesting? I think that is really the key. And then the next question is, why is it important? So those are the two key things. They can sort that out. I think they're on their way.
I hope many will be pursuing you. Thank you very much indeed.
Okay.